300 inches of snow in a single winter. And the people who live there don't just survive it, they build their lives around it, schedule around it, sleep times through times it, until the night they can't. It was around 3 in the morning when he climbed onto the roof. A homeowner in Keweenaw County, Michigan, the kind of man who knows the sound his rafters make when they're under stress. He knew because he'd heard it before. A low creak, then silence, then another creak slightly longer than the first. That sequence, he'd learned, means you have maybe an hour, maybe less. Outside, the temperature sat at -4 Fahrenheit. The snow on his roof measured 11 feet, 3 inches. He'd been tracking it on a pole he'd driven into the peak years earlier. The kind of low-tech solution that only makes sense if you've watched a neighbor lose a garage. 11 feet. That's roughly the height of a standard basketball hoop, packed solid on top of your head while you sleep. He had a headlamp, a flat aluminum shovel, and the specific dread of someone doing math in the dark. A cubic foot of wet lake-effect snow weighs somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds. His roof was carrying thousands of cubic feet. He didn't need a calculator, he needed to move faster. If you are finding this interesting, subscribe so we can bring more to the channel. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan locals call it the UP, receives more snow than almost any inhabited place in the contiguous United States. The Keweenaw Peninsula, a finger of land that juts roughly 60 miles into Lake Superior at the UP's northern tip, averages over 270 inches of snowfall per year. The average. Some winters push past 300. The winter of 1978-79 dropped 390.4 inches in Keweenaw County. That's over 32 feet across the full season, recorded by the Keweenaw County Road Commission. So the man on the roof at 3 in the morning is a fixture here. Every winter, in dozens of houses strung along roads like Brockway Mountain Drive or scattered through the Houghton-Hancock corridor. Someone climbs up before dawn because waiting until morning is a bet they've already decided not to make. He worked for 90 minutes. The snow came off in sheets that hit the ground with a weight he could feel through his boots. His shoulders burned. The headlamp kept fogging. And here's the thing about lake-effect snow, that nobody outside this region really processes. It doesn't arrive the way regular snow arrives. It comes in bands. Narrow, violent, almost surgical columns of moisture that Lake Superior pulls off its own surface and fires inland. You can be standing in full sun, look west, and watch a white wall moving toward you at 30 miles per hour. That wall had already passed once that night, and the weather station at Houghton County Memorial Airport was showing another band forming over the lake. The second band hit Keweenaw just before 5 in the morning, 14 inches in 4 hours. By the time the sun came up, the drifts against the north-facing walls of houses in Calumet had swallowed the ground floor windows whole. The snowfall records for this place are the kind of numbers that take a few reads to settle, because 300 inches sounds like something someone invented to make a point. Houghton, Michigan, the largest city on the Keweenaw Peninsula, averages 202 inches a season. The communities further up the Copper Country push past 300. Keweenaw County, at the tip, has logged single seasons above 390 inches, including that 390 4-inch winter of 1978-79, recorded by the Keweenaw County Road Commission. Multiple county and regional snowfall trackers document the same figure. For scale, New York City gets about 30 inches a year. Boston, on a bad winter, gets 60. What falls on Keweenaw in a single November storm can outpace Boston's entire season. And the people here built a life around it, a real one. That's what kept pulling at the story. The UP's snowfall didn't just shape the landscape, it shaped the calendar, the architecture, the social contract. Houses here are built with doors on the second floor, not decorative, functional, because the ground floor entry disappears for months. Roof pitches are engineered to a specific angle to shed load before the cumulative weight cracks the structure. There are communities on this peninsula where kids still ski to school, not as a novelty, but because the roads get low priority and the skis are faster. Copper country was one of the wealthiest mining regions on the continent in the late 1800s. The wealth left. The infrastructure stayed, half buried, and the people who remained learned to treat the snow less like weather and more like a material, something to be managed, stacked, redirected, used. Because it works. It has worked, generation after generation, in one of the most isolated stretches of the lower 48, the UP. Has roughly 300,000 people spread across an area larger than Massachusetts and Connecticut combined. When a storm locks down the roads, communities don't wait for outside help. They have the equipment, the knowledge, the instinct. They've been doing it longer than most American cities have existed in their current form. But there's something happening underneath all of that competence. Something unexpected. The snowpack is changing, the lake effect engine is changing, and the system the UP built, the whole elegant, brutal architecture of survival, was calibrated to a specific kind of winter that is starting to arrive differently than it used to. The total accumulation numbers are still high, but the timing is off. The temperature windows are wrong, and the people who have been reading this landscape their entire lives are describing something they don't quite have a name for yet. That disorientation, the feeling of a system running on old instructions, follows you into the geography itself, because the Upper Peninsula shouldn't exist the way it does, not as a populated place, not as a functioning society. Look at a map long enough, and something starts to feel wrong about it. A finger of land. A narrow, irregular strip pressed between Lake Superior to the north, Lake Michigan and Lake Huron to the south, and a border with Wisconsin and Minnesota to the west that most people couldn't draw from memory. The whole thing measures roughly 16,000 square miles, about the size of Switzerland, and it holds around 300,000 people. Switzerland has 8 million. That ratio tells you something. The UP stretches nearly 340 miles from east to west. Drive it end to end, and you've covered more ground than the full length of the state of Ohio. But only one city on the whole peninsula even brushes 20,000 people. Marquette, the largest. After that, the numbers drop fast. 8,000, 4,000, 900, and then just towns with a gas station and a school that shares grades. Water surrounds the UP on 3 sides, and for most of its history, the only way across the Straits of Mackinac was a ferry that stopped running when the ice came in. The Mackinac Bridge, 5 miles of steel and cable, opened in 1957, solved the crossing, but for generations before it, communities went weeks at a time, every winter, with no reliable connection to the rest of Michigan. Some of them stopped waiting for a solution from outside. They built wood piles, root cellars, supply chains calibrated to the gap between the last ferry of autumn and the first crossing of spring. The bridge changed the logistics, the instinct stayed. And the western end of the UP, the Keweenaw Peninsula, jutting even further north into Lake Superior like a thumb on top of a fist, averages around 273 inches of snow per year. With that record-setting 390.4 inches in 1,978.79, that's more than 32 feet in a single season. For context, the average American city gets maybe 26 inches a year. The Keweenaw gets that in a week when the lake is still open and the wind comes from the right direction. 300,000 people chose this, or their grandparents did, or their great-grandparents came for copper and stayed when the copper ran out, and now staying is just what the family does. The infrastructure they built to make that choice survivable took generations to calibrate, and it was calibrated specifically to the winters that existed then. Then the winters changed, slowly. The kind of change you only catch if you've been measuring long enough. And in the UP, they have been measuring obsessively, because snow isn't just weather up here, it's the variable everything else gets calculated against. The mechanism matters. Lake Superior sits at roughly 31,700 square miles of open water. In autumn, when Arctic air from Canada rolls south and hits that surface, the air picks up heat and moisture and then dumps it the second it crosses land. Cold air, warm lake, sudden shoreline, that's the whole engine. What falls on Chicago, about 38 inches a year, is mostly synoptic snow, the kind that comes from large storm systems moving through. What falls on Houghton is something else entirely. The Keweenaw Peninsula juts roughly 60 miles out into the lake like a pointing finger, which means it catches the fetch from almost every compass direction. The snow bands stack. That 394-inch winter wasn't an accident of luck. It was the machine running at full capacity. And the people who settled here built for it, properly built for it. Roof pitches steep enough to shed load before it accumulates. Second-story doors that open to nothing in summer but become exits when January buries the ground floor entry. The Copper Range Railroad, before it closed, ran rotary plows that could throw snow 80 feet to the side. The Keweenaw's Road Commission operates a fleet that would make most states blush. Generations of calibration written into the buildings and the roads and the way people organize a Thursday. The problem is what it was calibrated to. Lake Superior freezes, or it used to freeze, consistently by late December or January across most of its surface. Ice cover cuts the moisture source. The lake effect machine shuts down. February and March was still brutal, but the worst of the accumulation happened in that November to January window when the water stayed open. Since 1973, the average annual ice cover on Lake Superior has dropped from around 40% to closer to 25% in recent winters, according to NOAA's Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory. The lake stays open longer. Warmer surface temperatures mean more evaporation, more moisture loaded into those cold air masses coming from the north. The snowfall totals in the Keweenaw over the last decade trend heavier in certain windows, and the windows are shifting later into winter, harder in February, when the old infrastructure calendar assumed the worst was already over. The roofs were built for heavy accumulation spread across a known season. The plowing schedules were written around patterns that held for roughly a century. What nobody quite planned for was a lake that refuses to close on time anymore, feeding a snow machine that was already running at its limit. The infrastructure is holding, for now, but the math that made it hold was written for a different lake. So the math changed, but the houses are still standing. That deserves some credit. What residents in the UP built over about a century and a half of trial and catastrophic error is something most Americans have never needed to imagine. A second infrastructure layered directly on top of the first, designed for the assumption that winter here will try to kill you and probably succeed at killing something you love. A car, a roof, a heating bill you can't pay. Houghton heated sidewalks running through the downtown core. A few blocks, the critical ones, where ice would otherwise make the whole street unusable from November through April. The system runs on a loop of hot water piping embedded in the concrete, drawing from a central plant, and it costs the city roughly $300,000 a year to operate. $300,000 to keep maybe 4 blocks walkable. The first time that number comes up, it sounds absurd. Then you think about what happens if those 4 blocks aren't walkable. The roofs here have a pitch you don't see anywhere south of the tension line, steep enough that snow slides before it loads. Some older buildings have secondary roofs, a lower lean-to extension running the full perimeter specifically to catch what slides off the main roof so it doesn't bury the entrance. There are buildings in Calumet that have been modified 3 or 4 separate times since the 1880s, each modification a lesson from a winter that went slightly worse than the one before. And then there are the plowing networks. Municipal plows cover the roads, yes, but the roads aren't the point. The point is the driveways, the sidewalks that aren't heated, the paths between buildings, the routes to the woodpile. Neighbors run in formal rotations. Somebody with a bigger machine covers the street, somebody else does the elderly couple 2 houses down, somebody else gets the church parking lot, because if the church lot doesn't get plowed, the informal mutual aid meeting that happens there every Thursday doesn't happen either. The whole thing is oral, unwritten. It has worked for decades because the same families have lived on the same streets for generations, and everybody knows whose truck can handle the drift by the Bjornstad place. It works, almost always. February 2019, temperatures across the UP dropped to -35 Fahrenheit during a polar vortex that arrived on top of a snowpack, already sitting at 180 inches for the season. The heated sidewalk system in Houghton partially failed. 3 segments went cold within 48 hours. The repair crews couldn't reach the subterranean piping because the access points were under 4 feet of compacted snow. They got it back online in 6 days. 6 days in February at -35, with half the heated surface gone, and the whole system was carrying something it had never quite been designed to carry at the same time. More snow, arriving faster, from a lake that still hadn't closed. That 6-day repair window didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a place that once held 100,000 people, and now holds fewer than 37,000. And the bones of those 100,000 are still here, rusting and silent, spread across a geography that never got smaller. The copper started moving out of this ground in the 1840s. In its 19th century peak, the Keweenaw Peninsula alone produced the majority of all the copper mined in the United States. Calumet had an opera house, Hancock had department stores, Red Jacket, a town that barely registers on a map today, had streetcars. Actual streetcars, running through a city buried in lake-effect snow 6 months a year, because the money was that serious and the ambition matched it. Then the Chilean and Arizona deposits opened up. Deeper ore, cheaper extraction. The economics shifted in about 15 years, and the population started bleeding out. By 1930, the slide was obvious. By 1960, it was structural. Today, the entire Upper Peninsula runs around 300,000 people across an area larger than Massachusetts and Connecticut combined 2 states' worth of land. The population of a mid-sized American suburb. What the miners left behind is the problem nobody talks about. The infrastructure, the roads, the water mains, the sewer lines, the school buildings, was built for a civilization 10 times the current size. Calumet's downtown has buildings that could house a city of 40,000. The actual population of Calumet Township today sits around 1,500. Those buildings don't disappear. They sit there needing roofs, needing foundations, needing heat through winters that will drop to -30 and pile snow to the second floor. The maintenance cost figures for the Copper Country's road network tell part of that story. Well over 1,000 lane miles kept open through a winter that routinely delivers 200 inches or more. The county budget for road maintenance runs under $9 million annually. Divide that across the people paying into it. The result doesn't make sense for what those roads are being asked to do. And the snowfall keeps arriving on its own schedule, completely indifferent to what any budget says. There's a particular kind of pressure that builds in a place like this, not dramatic, not sudden, more like a slow compression. Every winter, the infrastructure absorbs another season. Every spring, the repair list is longer than the one before. Every decade, the tax base is a little thinner, and the buildings are a little older, and the gap between what exists and what can be maintained grows by a margin nobody announces but everyone feels. The copper made this place. The copper left. And the question that started pulling at the numbers wasn't whether the Upper Peninsula could survive the snow. It was whether it could survive what the snow costs. There's a type of family the Keweenaw has been producing for about 100 years, 3 generations under the same county roof. The grandparents who stayed when the mines closed because the land was paid off and leaving felt like surrender. The parents who found work, state road, crew, school, cafeteria, whatever the county still funded. And the kids who grew up thinking that was normal until they left for college or didn't, and either way came back to the same calculation their grandparents ran, whether staying made more sense than going. Keweenaw County counted barely 2,000 residents in the 2020 census. Families like this one are a significant fraction of that number. 2019 was not a record winter For snowfall, the Keweenaw averages around 273 inches. Some years push past 300, and 2019 sat somewhere in the middle. What made it brutal was the sequence, a series of lake effect events stacked so close together that the roads couldn't recover between them. M26, the main artery through the tip of the peninsula, closed on January 14th. It didn't reopen for 11 days. 11 days is a long time to think about what you need. For families like this one, and there are enough of them that the county knows their addresses by heart, the calculus goes like this. The grandfather is in his 70s. He has a prescription filled once a month in Houghton, 45 miles south. The father works road crew, which means when the roads close, he's out there with a plow, sleeping in shifts at the county garage because driving home is impossible. The mother is the one left holding the house together, rationing what's in the pantry, watching the wood stove, listening to a weather radio that keeps saying the same thing. They had enough food. Most people up here keep enough food. That's not where the pressure comes from. It comes from the grandfather's medication running 3 days short. It comes from the youngest kid running a fever on day 6, and the nearest open road being a county track that a four-wheel drive could maybe push through, maybe not. It comes from the father calling home from the garage on day 8 and asking how the propane gauge looks, and the answer being lower than anyone wanted to say out loud. The roads opened on day 12. Everyone was fine. That word, fine, does a lot of work up here. It carries a full winter's worth of close calls and managed silences and decisions made at 2 in the morning when the wind was doing something the walls could feel. What kept coming back was the math behind fine, the grandfather's prescription, the gap between what the county can plow and how fast the snow falls, the father at the garage knowing exactly which families are at the end of which roads. Fine this year, fine last year. The margin is there, but it's not wide, and it's been narrowing for longer than anyone wants to count. The same snow that saves the economy is the snow that caves the roofs. Worth sitting with that. The UP pulls in somewhere around $400 million a year from winter tourism, snowmobiles, ski lodges, ice fishing, the whole circuit of people who drive up from Chicago or Detroit to touch the cold on purpose and then leave. That money keeps towns like Ironwood and Calumet and Houghton breathing through March. Without the snowpack, you lose the economy. Simple as that. But 300 inches is weight, not a postcard. A cubic foot of dense, wet UP snow. The kind that accumulates after a warm spell, followed by a hard freeze, runs somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds. A modest house roof, say 2,000 square feet. Do the math. A bad accumulation week can put 40,000 pounds on a structure that was built when the lumber was cheaper and the inspectors were fewer. Older homes in Keweenaw County, some of them pushing 100 years, were never engineered for this. They were built by people who figured they'd just keep shoveling. Some of them stopped shoveling. There's a specific kind of collapse the locals call a pancake. The roof comes down in a single sheet. No warning crack, no gradual sag, just a sound like a gunshot, and then silence. It happens to barns first, then garages, then, occasionally, to the houses themselves. And the isolation. A 78-year-old woman living alone outside Berglund doesn't always have someone checking the roof. She might not have someone checking her, period. The UP has one of the oldest median populations in Michigan, and the roads at the end of those roads, the ones the county gets to last, that's where the oldest people tend to be. The ones who moved out there when they were young and never had a reason to leave. In February 2008, a man was found in his driveway outside Ironwood. The snow had come fast, the way it does when Lake Superior decides to remind you it's still there. He'd gone out to clear the walk. He didn't make it back inside. The father at the garage, the families at the end of which roads, the margin. What's striking, and the numbers back it up, is that the Road Commission for Ontonagon County operates with roughly the same budget in real dollars as it did 15 years ago, while the average annual snowfall has trended upward over that same period. The plows are the same, the crews are smaller, the snow doesn't negotiate. So the same snowpack that draws the snowmobilers in January is, by February, quietly calculating what it can take down. A barn here, an elderly woman's driveway there. The winter economy and the winter mortality report both go up in the same years. The same inches land on the ski resort and on the widow's driveway. What the UP figured out generations ago, out of pure necessity, is something most of America has completely forgotten how to do. Winter is a contract. You work within it. You build around it. You stake your livelihood on it arriving, heavy and relentless, the way it always has. Then came a winter that broke the pattern. 60 inches below average. That's the gap between a normal winter and almost nothing, measured in snowmobiles that stayed in storage, in trail grooming crews that lost their hours, in motels along M28 that saw January bookings drop and didn't fully understand why until the cancellations stopped coming in and started just not existing. The Keweenaw Peninsula, which averages around 273 inches a season, landed closer to 140, enough to look like winter, not enough to function like one. The International Snowmobile Association estimates that snowmobiling alone generates roughly $26 billion annually across the US and Canada. In the UP, the trail system, over 3,700 miles of it, the densest network in the country, is the artery that keeps small towns alive between November and March. When the base depth drops, the trails close. When the trails close, the sleds stay home. And when the sleds stay home, the gas stations in Ironwood and Wakefield and Land O'Lakes feel it inside a week. That winter, some operators in Keweenaw County reported a 30% revenue loss in a single season, one winter. What that means for a business already running on thin margins, in a county where the median household income sits around $40,000, is a gap with no buffer. These places don't have an off-season revenue stream they can lean into. The summer is real. The kayakers come, the hikers come, but summer doesn't replace a snow economy. The numbers don't add up that way. They never did. What made that winter stranger was the timing. The decade before had trended heavier. Ironwood had recorded back-to-back 200-inch seasons. Businesses had expanded. Some families had taken on equipment loans betting on another strong winter. And then the pattern broke and didn't say why. Climate researchers tracking the Great Lakes keep circling the same instability, a zone where warming Lake Superior temperatures are producing wetter, denser precipitation events in some years, and almost nothing in others. The average, over 20 years, looks stable, but the individual seasons are swinging harder in both directions. More extreme highs, lower lows. The average masks what's actually happening. The UP is now running a business model built on a climate pattern that is becoming, quietly and without announcement, unreliable. The towns that survived 2 centuries of brutal winters knew exactly what they were dealing with. What they're dealing with now is different. The cold is still there. The clouds still roll in off the lake. But whether the snow actually falls in the quantities that keep a town financially alive has started to feel less like a certainty and more like a bet. And some of those bets are already coming due. Take Ontonagon. Census after census, the village keeps shrinking down near 1,300 people by 2020. Those numbers sound small until you think about what they mean for a grocery store, a school, a hardware shop trying to justify staying open through March. Rural decline compounds quietly. One family leaves. Then the business that family used loses a customer. Then the employee of that business moves closer to a city that actually has jobs. And then there are 3 fewer kids in the school district. And suddenly the district is debating consolidation again. County-level census data tells the same story almost everywhere you look. Nearly every one of the UP's 15 counties lost population between 2010 and 2020. Keweenaw County sits at around 2,000 people scattered across its long reach into the lake. Ontonagon County has roughly 5,600 people spread across 1,300 square miles. 4 people per square mile. Those numbers predate the pandemic. They predate remote work. They include the years when people were supposed to be streaming back to rural places. The projections for some townships, not the major hubs, but the smaller communities between them, put functional population below viable service thresholds by 2045. That means the EMS station closes because there aren't enough volunteers. The school consolidates again, which means the kids are on a bus for 45 minutes away, which means young families with options start doing the math, and the math doesn't work, which means the school loses more students. The cycle doesn't need a catastrophe, it just needs time. And the snow didn't drive people out. For 200 years, the snow was the reason people stayed. The snowmobilers came in January. The skiers came in February. The ice fishers came whenever Black River froze solid enough. The winters were hard, and the winters were the economy. They were the identity. You put up with 300 inches of snow because 300 inches of snow put food on the table. What's driving people out is something the weather can't fix, and declining snowfall can only accelerate. Young people leave for college and don't come back because the jobs aren't there, because the infrastructure is aging, because the nearest major hospital is 100 miles away. And that starts to matter more once you have children, or once your parents get sick. For 200 years, the snow paid people to stay, the compensation that made every other hardship pencil out. So when you hear that snowfall totals are trending down, not every year, but directionally, measurably, enough that resort operators are buying more snowmaking equipment just to maintain the base, what you're really hearing is that the one thing, offsetting all the reasons to leave, is becoming less reliable. The UP has survived everything the lake threw at it. What it hasn't figured out yet is how to survive becoming optional, and yet people stay. Every number points toward leaving the winters, the wages, the distances, the slow demographic bleed, and still, roughly 300,000 people wake up on that peninsula every morning and choose it again, quietly, without making a thing of it. The ones who remain tend to share something harder to measure than income or age, a tolerance for silence that runs deeper than preference. A relationship with difficulty that stopped feeling like difficulty somewhere along the way. You hear it in how they talk about February.